tee you up and let you run with it. So looks like we are on here. So first, Dave, thanks. I really appreciate you, you joining me on such kind of entry, just by running across you on YouTube. I just thought it was great. But anyway, so
it's a pleasure to be here, Jeff. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm thrilled, and I've been really looking forward to it. So anyway, so to put things in perspective, what are the benefits to business leaders of doing interviews?
Well, if you're a business leader, ultimately you need to have a brand that runs alongside your business. And as Warren Buffett has said, that your ability to speak is probably about 50% plus 50% towards how much money you're going to make in your lifetime, because you will be prominent, you will be regarded, you will be respected, you will be held accountable, but also it's instant marketing. And so when you look at the money that's in the advertising world of agencies all over the place putting a spin on what it is that you do and your company does and all the marketing, there's nothing more effective than being there on the hot seat, people asking you questions, and you position yourself as an industry expert. And I work with people all the time, all around the world, to position them as industry icons. Now, why is that important? Because celebrity is something, being an influencer is something that's kind of been done to death. If you're gorgeous and you're funny and you're very good at going to places that make you look really picturesque, then you can be an influencer, because people's eyeballs will follow what it is that you do, especially on Instagram, but now on TikTok as well. But I don't think that that's the angle. I think that's got a shelf life. I think the key to it is, if you are brilliant at what you do, then you need to be able to tell people how brilliant you are at what you do. Now, why is this important? Well, it means you don't burn as brightly as your normal influencer or celebrity. But what it also means is you're not held accountable for your personal life or even your personal views in the same way as your ability to do what you do brilliantly, which is deliver content, deliver services, create stuff that people would want. And so being interviewed and having your words and your voice and your ideas go out means that people identify with your mindset, and they learn to trust you. And if they learn to trust you, then they want to buy from you. And so you sell the certainty that if somebody's going to like you, they trust your business, and they trust your business savvy to deliver what they wanted from you. And that's why they connect.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sorry, it's about 108 degrees here today.
Where are you?
I'm in the middle part of the U.S. In the plains in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really hot. But,
well, in Dubai, it's crazy hot, but we've got air conditioning everywhere. I was talking to my mother in the UK. She's in Leeds. She's got a window closed, curtains down, because they're going through a heat wave. And there's no way to deal with it, because it's only meant for cold weather in the UK.
That must be absolutely miserable. So anyway, can you give us some examples of the kind of interviews that you do, both as a host and a guest?
Yeah, it really varies, because I do a lot of stuff that's, I don't do so much online as I was during the pandemic, because I tend to be out and about doing stuff more than anything. I do a lot of stuff on stages. So for instance, when I'm hosting big events, I'll do interviews with a panel or one-to-ones with individuals who are brilliant at what they do. And my background is being I'm an ex-BBC journalist. So my job is not to know a lot of different subjects. My job is to know how to get the best out of a subject in front of me, the person, and be able to ask leading questions that give them the answers that they should ultimately be able to share with the audience. Because the thing is, even the interview that you're doing with me now, and any part of business, your relationship with your partners, with your wife, your children, your friends, you've got to ask one question: what's in it for them? If you think about what's in it for them, then you'll give them what they want, and that will make them happy. So for anybody who's married and thinking, why don't we get on? Have you asked your partner what they want and just delivered that? Then they're happy, which means that you become happy. So ultimately, when you're interviewing somebody, what you've got to do is, you're not interviewing that person to make them happy. It's not up to them. you're interviewing it to give something to the audience, because if the audience doesn't perceive a value that they get from this interaction, we've got lots of other options like pressing click or going to Netflix or looking on YouTube or anything else. So what you've got to do is basically, and my BBC training was about this, you stay neutral, you hold up a mirror effectively with your questions to the person in front of you, and it's their job to share with your audience what it is that they need to know from the questions. And if they avoid it, I mean, don't answer the questions effectively, then you've got to respond with deeper questions, more probing questions, or sometimes you walk away and you just leave them on that. Because if somebody tells you a lie to a question where we know the answer and you challenge them and they still stick with it, then what do you want to do? Do you want to fall out with them, or do you let the viewer at home work out for themselves what's going on? So I try and make sure that I've got a good rapport with the person in front of me. I don't want to humiliate them. I give them full respect, whoever they are, but I'm very aware that our job is to get information to the viewer or the listener so they come away with something that they can use to make their life or their business better than it was before they started paying attention to what we're talking about.
So then are you most often the guest or the host?
Most of the time, let's see, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It all kind of blurs. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I get interviewed quite a lot about my expertise on branding, speaking, and just, how to do motivation and so on, because I've been a motivational speaker for 20 plus years. But I do interview people quite a lot, but that tends to be on stages. So for instance, if I'm hosting an event, what's typical is you'll get the audience at a fever pitch, you bring on the guest speaker, they do their thing, but before they leave, if there's time, you get to ask a couple of questions to the speaker, or you let the audience do it. Now, 99% of the time, the audience don't do anything. The audience, when they're really excited and they love it, they just go, and that's a good audience, because a bad audience will leave. But it means that you've got somebody there who wants to answer more questions. So sometimes, if they've got time, sometimes I'll ask them questions, but sometimes I'll wait and see what the reaction is. And if it looks like it's a done deal, then I'll let them go from the stage and take over myself. So it really depends. I do interview usually people in the corporate space. I don't do a lot of celebrities the way I used to. When I was on the radio, on TV, it was all about getting eyeballs on big stars. So guys like Bruce Willis and let's see, James Brown, and a ton of people I've worked on stage with, and some of them interviewed, especially from the corporate world, like Jack Canfield and Brian Tracy and some really well-known sort of business leaders. I've had the pleasure of talking to them on my own TV show. In fact, many of them I did about 15 years ago, before anybody was doing these kind of interviews. And I would lug it. I would couple on my camcorder, which was probably about the same size as a coffee cup. You remember those things when people didn't have phones. So I'd bring along this and have a tripod, and I was the only person who was there to interview. Nobody had camera phones. So I'd set it up and I'd wait patiently, and I'd get the interview with a big star, because they all came to Dubai, and then I'd be able to use it on, I'm not even sure if we had YouTube then, or Facebook. I think I put it on Facebook because it just started. But certainly nobody was there to queue up to do interviews, because how could they? Nobody wants to carry a big bag with a camcorder in and a tripod. So that's how I started doing them there. But I think what we've got now is a wonderful situation where anybody can do citizens broadcasting. You can be a broadcasting house from your own home, from your own office, from the street, doesn't matter, just from your phone. And that makes it a wonderful opportunity for anybody to create a podcast. And it's not necessary for you to have a huge following or a huge audience. Not everybody is going to be Joe Rogan. And sometimes it's better that you're not. Sometimes it's better that you just talk from the heart to an audience that wants to know about a certain subject. So everybody should have a podcast to support their business. And if they want to show their expertise, interview all the people that work with you, not your staff, but the suppliers, the experts in the industry. And what happens is it raises the game of your business and the credibility that you have. People then say, wow, I really love your podcast because I love your stuff. I want to buy from you because you're the expert. So I think it's massively useful for people to do that. In terms of the interviews I do with everybody, it's really about working out what's best for the audience. And I don't love everybody I interview. Sometimes I can't wait for them to leave stage. I've got to be honest. But most of them are interesting.
Well, you mentioned James Brown and Jack Canfield. I think they probably represent two ends of the spectrum there.
Well, yeah, because I used to work on radio. When I stopped working on radio, I worked on a commercial radio station. So when anybody came to Dubai who was a big star, then I would usually go on stage and do the introduction to the audience, and then I bring them on stage, and so I was a warm up act for all these guys. And sometimes I was blessed enough to do interviews with them directly. So, for instance, I got to open up Planet Hollywood in Dubai. So I was working with Bruce Willis, Sylvester Stallone, Amitabh Bachchan, who's a huge godfather of Hindi radio, of Hindi TV, Cindy Crawford, Wesley Snipes, and Patrick Swayze. Not a bad lineup. I mean, that's going back a few years. I didn't have the grey hair in place then, but that was typical for the work I was doing. So I interviewed, worked on stage with Enrique Iglesias and the Spice Girls, UB40, Robert Plant, Sting. Goodness knows, I'm a very old person.
Wow. So, do you ever get nervous interviewing people like that?
Sometimes you do. And it really depends on whether they're good to play with or not. Because some people are really great. You get a rapport with them and they're really easy to deal with. Some people aren't. So, for instance, I haven't interviewed him, but I've seen him interviewed Robert De Niro. Hard not to crack. He's a grumpy old person. And so he wants to say what he wants to say, doesn't want to mess about. Harrison Ford, Al Pacino, some of the great heroes are like that. But then again, you got a guy like Tom Hanks, who's lovely to talk to. So what I try and do is pre-talk with them first. I interviewed Stan Lee, from Marvel many years ago, when his movies were first starting to get onto the cinemas. And I think that what you do is you do your preparation. As long as you've got that, then it's much easier. But at the end of the day, even the Queen goes to the bathroom, hopefully not in an interview. So everybody's human. And if they want to act like a jerk, then the audience will see that they're acting like a jerk. You are the eyes and ears of your audience. So for what I do, like say a live event that gets streamed live, I've got about 7 or 8 different audiences I've got to deal with. So I've got the voices in my head that are saying, right, Dave, what are you going to do next? I've got the person in front of me who I've got to interview and talk to. I've got the audience in the studio or in front of us who are live, who are watching everything, so I've got to talk to them as well. I've got the showrunner or the stage manager who's walking around, keeping an eye on everything and keeping an eye on the time and keeping an eye on the lights and the sound and so on. I've also got the sponsors. I've got to keep them happy because ultimately, if I don't do the job that they paid for, they won't want to sponsor the event again and they won't want to bring me back as the reason for it being successful. Then if you're streaming live, you got an audience at home, and the audience at home are also watching the audience. They get the vibe of the studio audience. So the studio audience or the live audience are cheering. At home, you feel the cheer. If they're booing, at home, you feel the boo. It's like you catch the Wi-Fi code of everybody. Then you've got to think about, as a speaker or a host, you have to think about your optics, which is if you do an event, you've also got to think about the footage. You get your next event because you've just done the previous one, so you need to have some good sound bites and some good visuals. So that's about 7 or 8 different things you're going on at the same time as asking a question to the person in front of you. It can be quite difficult to juggle. I don't get nervous. I just embrace it. And to be honest with you, here's what I do. I don't care. If it goes wrong, I've been around for a long time, so I know I'm not going to mess it up. I'm going to do the best job I can do, but I'm happy to look stupid. I'm happy to get it wrong, but I'll always make sure that the audience gets the most out of it. I've been on stage at Dubai Rugby Sevens with 50,000 people in the audience, and we had a power cut, and all the electrics went off, and you got live sport, the floodlights are working, microphone's not working, but the screen was. So during my break, I told the guys, can you put on onto the big board Wonderwall by Oasis? It's a famous song, a British song for the audience. So they put it up, and I walked out in the middle of the field and started conducting the singing with my hands. And the whole audience sung the song a cappella. And we did that many years with Bohemian Rhapsody and so on. I mean, I'm a stage hypnotist as well. And I went out in an event in South Africa where we had a complete power cut. I was halfway through the show, great show, people doing crazy stuff on stage, and then the lights go off. And I'm looking at the guys in the wings going, right, what do we do? They're going, leave it, leave it. And we're trying to make phone calls, but everything else is pitch dark. Full crowd. My first night, it was probably about 2/3 were media. I've got 10 people on stage in the dark who'll do anything I tell them to, but my responsibility is to keep them safe. So I waited about 10 minutes for the guys to say the lights are coming back on. They didn't come back on. And I'm thinking, are people thinking that this is part of the show? Because it's not funny now, and they still need something out of it. So then I thought, I'm in a theatre, the microphone's not working, but I'm in a theatre. Theatres, when they have a play, not everybody's walking around the microphone, so the acoustics must be quite good. So I said to the audience, can you still hear me talking? They said, yes. I said, great. Everyone take a big deep breath and close your eyes. And I hypnotized the entire audience. And I took them on a trip to find success in the future, pacing their job and their relationships and luck and all the different things that were involved in their future. I did it for about half an hour. During that half an hour, the lights didn't come back on. So after about half an hour, I'm done. I want to go home. So I said to them, right, what we're going to do is I'm going to count from 1 to 10, but everybody's going to come out of their hypnosis and they're going to light up their phone cameras to illuminate the room, give yourselves a massive round of applause and make your way out. So I counted from 1 to 10. On the count of 10, all the lights went up in the room as all the phones went on. Massive round of applause, waking up everybody. Everyone's happy. They start making their way out towards the exits. As soon as they opened the doors, the lights came in. Not inside the theatre, but outside. Why? Because apparently, I only got told later on, in South Africa, certainly Johannesburg, they have a lot of power cuts. And they've got generators. And where I was at Caesar's Palace, which is this huge resort of gaming, they've got generators, but only for the gaming, because they generate money there. As far as they're concerned, theatres, restaurants, we don't make the money. That's just the punters who make their money. And so everything else was going apart from Muggins in his theatre. And so the power came back to the theatre 4 hours later. Did I panic? A little bit. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. And when you look back at it, it gives you a smile. And I'm happy with that.
So what tips do you have for hosts to prepare to really bring out the best of their guests?
Okay, great question. Your job is to make rapport with the person in front of you. Your job is not to judge them. The audience's job is to judge them. So what I do is when I'm working live audience, I work out the Wi-Fi code of the audience, working out the demographic of who they are, what they want, where they're from, what their objectives are, and what will make them happy, and what will make them sad. People don't have to necessarily be happy. They can be satisfied with a sob story. It doesn't matter. You take it on a range of emotions. But with the person in front of you, your job is to find instant rapport, to get it so they know that you are competent, that you know your stuff, and also that you're going to get the best out of them. Now, the way I do it, when I'm hosting a big event, for instance, if I've got a panel that's suddenly thrown on me, as they often do, I've got 4 strangers, or 3 strangers usually, 3 strangers and me. I don't know who they are. If I ask them in advance or ask the organizer, can you send me their details? Everyone sends me a Wikipedia page. I've got better things to do than see you went to Harvard and you opened a business when you're 3 years old and you won the most positive. I don't care. I want 3 things from you. I want to know your name, designation, one thing that you did that gives you bragging rights to say that you're worth listening to, and secondly, what it is that you're going to be talking about. What's your area of expertise? So when I talk to interview somebody, what I do is I ask them what they want to talk about. I know the key area of the subject that we're going to do, but I ask them, what area do you feel most comfortable about? And with that, they either want to promote something, or if we have no subject, if we're given a subject because the event is about human resources or the metaverse or about the food industry or hospitality, I know it's related to that. I know what their position would be in it because I'm a BBC journalist by trade. And from there, work out what they want to talk about and where they want to lead this conversation for the audience. I can only remember a handful of interviews that have been terrible when people don't want to give you an answer. So it's a one-word answer. And one guy who, whenever he said anything, I would repeat back to him what he said. And then he'd say, no, it's not that. I'm thinking, but you just said it. But he was just an argumentative guy. I met him later on. Lovely guy, but that's how his brain works. He just likes to throw stuff out and change it. I'm an amazing chef. He creates the most incredible dishes, but as an interviewee, I would never, ever, ever sit with this guy ever again. I'd buy him a beer, but that's your lot.
Yeah, right. So on the flip side, then, what tips do you have for guests to get the most out of their interviews?
Okay, great question again. Why are you going on this interview? What do you get out of it? Who's your audience? What can you do to convert that audience to go onto your mailing list or sell product or start following you on social? If you don't know any of that, why are you going on in the first place? Because time is the one thing you never get back again. So use it preciously. So what you should do is know what it is you're going to be talking about, who it is who's going to be talking to you, and also have a call to action. For me, for instance, I create industry icons. I create people of industry success stories and help them to grow their brand. I teach them to speak, and I've got a community around the world called the Game Changers. So when I'm being interviewed, say I'm talking on stage as a keynote, or if I was being interviewed using my own set, I would have a QR code so people could scan it, get an instant download of a free gift, and from there they go to my mailing list so I can keep the interaction going. Because when you're being interviewed, if it's 10 minutes, if it's 15 minutes, if it's a personal interview about you, your brand, and your business, you've got people warmed up and excited. Now, if they can't then go to you, like for instance, my website is speakonstage.com. If they go to speakonstage.com, then they can follow up with me and see how I can help them, following my social media or anything else. If I don't have something to sell, or I don't have where to send people, they're going to be all fired up, all excited, and we're going to use that energy on the next person that comes up. So why would you waste that? So I would suggest that the thing to do is ask the person what they want to talk to you about, and then have it pre-prepared. I'd also say get some stories. Stories sell really well. It's not about you. Nobody cares about you. You don't care about me. Nobody has to care about me. It's what can Dave give you is important. I could be anybody. It doesn't matter. Most of the people listening to this or watching this will have no idea who I am at all. But if they Google Dave Crane, they'll find it. And I'll just move my head to one side so you get the spelling right. So you need to know how to tell those stories, rehearse them in your head, have an idea about, if you can, I mean, what I normally do is I'll ask in advance what the questions are. And I'll get my wife to do it on my behalf because we work together as a team. She's the bad cop, I'm the good cop. So she'll say, what is it you're going to talk to Dave about? So that means I can pre-prepare the answers. Now, I don't pre-prepare parrot fashion. In fact, I generally don't write anything down because I want it to feel spontaneous. But what I do is have it in my mind that these are the areas that I can enhance for the interviewee and for the interviewer, and also for the audience. I want to make sure that it's a rewarding experience for them and not just all about me, look at me, I'm great, and so on. Nobody cares about that, and I'm far too old to care whether they care about me being gorgeous anyway. So I'm more than happy for that not to be the case.
So when you're preparing to do an interview, do you write down your questions?
Me? No. But only because I've been around a long time. When I'm doing a keynote on stage, I tend to do, when you get these guys called free runners, the guys who basically jump over walls and over lampposts and do all this free running stuff. And I know superheroes like Spider-Man would use that, but there's people in real life that do that. I like to do that when I'm speaking. I like to go out there with an audience, have a basic subject worked out for who they are in front of me, and take them on a journey. And I realized that the way I do it with stories is like when I used to be a DJ. When you're a DJ, you go out and you look at your audience and you play your first track to get the audience excited, and you'll fill the dance floor with something that's a crowd pleaser. And while that's playing, you're thinking, right, what goes with that progresses the atmosphere and takes us in a new direction, or continues the direction if I want to. And then you put on a track there, and then you put on another track, and you do this all night until you take people on a journey of experiences. As a DJ, you do that with music. I realize as a speaker, that's what I do as well. I DJ stories and I DJ ideas. And when you do it like that, when you create a real relationship with the audience, the way to do it is not to, what I'd say to anybody who's a speaker or an interviewer is don't present anymore, don't speak anymore, have a conversation. Because if you have a conversation with your audience, or you have a conversation with who is interviewing you, then you don't have to be precise. because they'll forgive you. But if you say, this is me, I know what I'm talking about, blah, 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 I'm the authority, then people want you to get it wrong. If you don't say that and you say, look, ask me anything, if I get it wrong, then it's fair enough. But off the top of my head, this is what I believe it is. Then people go, oh, okay. And the idea is that you should be imagining yourself sitting with the audience next to them, staring at the stage or staring at the interview as one of them. And the other thing I'd say, especially when you're on a medium like this, is TV and radio, and this is TV ultimately, podcasts, radio, is a one-to-one experience. It's not one-to-many, like a live audience. So I can't say, how are you guys out there? Same as you wouldn't say on the radio, how are you guys doing? Because if I'm driving my car, I'm thinking, what guys are you talking to? This isn't personal. You're not talking to me. You're talking to everybody, and it doesn't feel like I've got a personal relationship. I'll find somebody who does appreciate me. And so it's really about imagining who your avatar is. Who would be the person you want to connect to? Who's the audience going to be? And it's usually the audience that follow the interviewer. What does that person want? So, for instance, if it's Joe's a businessman who started his own business a couple of years ago, self-made success story, but finding it hard during a recession. I've got to talk to Joe. I've got to give Joe all the tips, all the ideas that Joe would be able to use and then do something with. If I'm talking to me about me with an audience watching, who cares? So I think valuing people's time is a massive part of all this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when hosting an interview?
Yeah, I think the host has got to create a relationship with the guest. There's got to be a rapport there. They've got to represent the audience that's watching. They've got to fill in the gaps of what the audience would want to ask. So if a person in front of you is saying something that's clearly BS, you've got to pull them up on it. And if you can explain it and they stick with that story, that's it. But the audience is going to want to have that. There's nothing worse than watching and not being able to interact. You want to feel that the interviewer is representing you when you're doing it. So amongst the mistakes is not getting to know your audience and thinking it's anybody. It's not. There's a certain type of person who enjoys your stuff, and it might not even be you. You need to do your research. Have a look at social media. Do the data. Find out who pays attention to it. If you're doing a live broadcast on Facebook or LinkedIn, have a look at who's turning up. Look at the broadcast later and work out whether it was male or female or any particular industry or so on. Once you've got an idea about your avatar, and there might be several avatars, then you know where to send your business and how to do that. But it's very important you appreciate the people you got in front of you. So, for instance, if we were talking to kids, if we had a young audience, say even teenagers, I wouldn't be talking like this. I'd be talking with relevant points for them, for stuff that they're going to want to put into practice. So it's important to know who your audience is. I think that you need to give them what they need it's ultimately what's in it for them. So give them what they need. And if you can, when it's a live session, we've got all the facilities to let people ask questions, not let them live on the show, but give feedback in the chat comments or whatever it is. So be aware of that. And also have fun. Whenever there's so much content out there and so much choice, if they don't have fun with you, they go click and they leave, probably within the first 3 to 4 seconds. If they think this is dull, they'll go. And the younger your audience gets, the less patience they have. Got to remember, TikTok being one of the most popular platforms for social media on the planet, nothing goes to 60 seconds. My daughter, who's 11, shows me stuff all the time that's 15 to 30 seconds maximum. And she's laughing her head off, and my head's exploding because I hate it. I hate watching it because it's just too fast. But I'm not the target market. I look at what people are doing in business, and they've somehow managed to work out this is how you do it on TikTok. You give them a very quick tip. You tell them what the tip's going to be. You give them the tip, and you say, follow me, and that's it. Do that in 30 seconds, and people go, this is great, and they share it, and we give you eyeballs, and then it starts to grow your channel. So always keeping an eye on the data, always keeping an eye on the audience, and always being as transparent as you can be is important. But if you are scared of being you, and you are nervous, then you can create a different version of yourself. That's the person that goes on. So, I mean, for people who've got a fear of public speaking, or you've got imposter syndrome, I've got a system that I worked out to be able to get people over imposter syndrome. Would you like me to share it with you, Jeff?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's quite a long one, but it's worth it. So there's three versions of you. First version is what's on your birth certificate, which says who you were when you were born. Mine says David Maxwell Crane, born years ago. And so you go to school with that name. It's shortened by your parents, and you grow into somebody who later on becomes a version 2 of you, and that's a social media name that you use. So mine's Dave Crane. David Maxwell Crane became Dave Crane. And so Dave Crane's on my social media. He's a nice guy. He's been on lots of stages, and he's got a wife. He's got a kid. He's got 2 dogs. He's all right. It's fine. But what I realized was after the pandemic, when work was coming back to me, because I'd been as an entertainer without work for about 18 months, apart from doing stuff online, but it's not quite the same thing because you don't get the same interaction, and often you don't get paid for it. I had to jump back into the gig market quickly, and I wasn't ready. I was still on burnout because during that pandemic, I did about 200 live shows on social media to let people know that I was here and available, and it paid off later on. But I realized that me as Dave Crane, I was burnt out. I was tired. I was worried. I was insecure. I had a family to look after. We got through it, but it wasn't easy. So I thought, is there an extra version of me that I could get? I thought, yeah, if you think about it, when you're in your zone, and sports people will know this, when you hit the golf ball, or when you score a goal, or you get a basket, or you get a home run, it's not you that does it. It's a certain version of you that steps up. If you think about it too much, you hijack it, but there's a certain version of you that steps in like a muscle memory that does this stuff. And so I realized that my very best version of me is when I've got a live microphone with a live audience, and I make snap decisions, and I get things done, and I look after the sponsors, and I look after the audience, and I just think super fast on bam, bam, bam. And I thought, well, why don't you give them a name? So I decided to call this version of me Max, which is an incremented version of Dave Crane. So the third version of me is Max, taken from my middle name, Maxwell. So to test the water with Max, I decided, let's see how good he is. What if he's in a real setting? So if I can make great decisions when I've got a microphone and a live audience, and that's how I've made my success so far, what about in normal situations? Why don't I ask Max what he would do? So I had a situation where I was chasing clients, and some people weren't getting back to me. I thought, well, what would Max say? So I said, all right, Max, what would you do? And my subconscious mind said to me, well, why don't you give him 24 hours and tell him that if you don't get back in 24 hours, then I'll be too busy working with somebody else. I'm thinking, you can't do that. You'll lose a client. But I thought, if I'm going to wake up Max and trust Max, I'm going to do it. So I did it. And some people stepped up and came back to me fast. Some people ummed and ahed, and I realized they were never going to work with me anyway. So when I told them, right, that's it, we've missed the opportunity, and I'm busy working on something else, they never said, oh dear, that's terrible. They just didn't say anything. So it was quite clear that they didn't care. So then I thought, if Max is making these great decisions, what about if I trust Max to make all those decisions? So I handed over the running of my business, the running of my decisions, and everything apart from my family members to Max. So Max now makes those decisions for me, and is fearless. So the example of how that would work is during the time when we came out of the pandemic, I was invited to host the 2020 World Cricket, ICC World Cricket Cup. Now, I don't know anything about cricket. I'm not even a big fan of cricket. But where I'm based in Dubai, and for a huge Asian audience, Indians, Pakistanis, and Brits, and Australians, and New Zealanders, everybody's cricket crazy. Now, I had to host the event, which means I've got to be on a microphone in front of a live audience with it being watched by 200 million people around the world. And I've got to get the call right. I've got to say it's a 6, it's a 4. I've got to announce the new cricketer that's coming up. I've got to say he was caught and he's out and all this kind of stuff. So I was being coached to do it live by some guys who'd just done it before. And I knew it was going to be difficult, and I knew I'd get it wrong. But I knew that by the end of it, I could boast about the fact, well, not boast, but I could lay claim to the fact that I can host world cricket at the very highest level. So I did 8 matches, and we went right to the finals, and I was able to turn around and have that. Now, it wasn't me that did it, it was Max. For me, life was a bit more challenging, especially as I lost my dad after the second match. I lost my dad to COVID, and I still had another 7 matches to look after over the next 2 weeks. And the only way I could get through that is by handing over the microphone to Max. Take care of that. I'll go and I'll be spending my own time quiet. So I stepped up, did the gig. Nobody knew, nobody needed to know. But when I had my quiet time, I'd come off the pitch, go back home, call my mom, check my family, and make sure everything was going. So that third version of you, that superhero version of you, is immensely powerful. It's got an ego as well, so you got to keep that in check. But as long as you care about people and you want them to be better off than they were before you first met them, that version of you can be very powerful, very effective, and produce the best content and presentation skills that you could ever want.
Yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying, because you do kind of have to separate your personas, depending on what role you're playing and what job you're doing, right? It's a lot different. Well, and even with interviews, to me, it's a whole different skill set between interviewing someone and being interviewed. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, typically what happens is when I'm interviewing somebody, this is mine. You're in my house now, and we're going to set the scene, and it's going to run the way I'm going to run it. And I don't tend to do one-to-one interviews too often. I tend to do more panels. So I've got a group. It's like juggling. It's like herding cats. So you've got all these egos all trying to get stuff done. Now, if I'm hosting it, I'll take everyone to one side first. I'll say, this is how we're going to do it, whether it's online or on stage. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to give you a question. I'm going to work my way through everybody. In fact, what I do is I say, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to the audience. Keep it short and sweet. You got 60 seconds maximum to say who you are and why the audience should be interested in you. I'll give you a chance to do that. Then I've got all these questions which you've already agreed with me. I'll ask the first person, and then we'll move it all the way along. You've got 60 to 90 seconds to answer the question. If you take it longer than that, then I will not ask you the next question. You'll forfeit it because you overstayed your welcome. And that's the way I run it. And so everybody knows what their role is, and I'll give everyone a fair chance to play, and I'll make it perfect. Now, if I'm a panel member on somebody else's panel, I'll do the opposite. For me, it's a beauty pageant. I will cheat. I will take up as much time as I want, and I'll say what I want to say, and I'll make sure that people come away from there saying, I want to work with Dave Crane. That was funny, that's insightful, and I really want to hire you, and I want to get you into work with my staff. Completely different ends of it. But then again, you see, if I sit there quietly, and here's an example. I was hosting, in fact, I was a keynote speaker at an event for women in Dubai. So business women in Dubai, all really high-end, brilliant, fantastic, wonderful businesses. And I was the only guy in the room, apart from 2 boyfriends that had come along to support the audience. So I delivered a keynote all about branding. It went down very well. And then I was put on a panel. It was me and there's 3 other ladies. Now, the other ladies were one of the top business coaches in the country, a royal, and an author who just brought out a book on women in business, and me looking like blooming Morgan Freeman. So I'm sitting there, and so because I was sitting on the first chair, the question came to me. So I answered the question, then it goes to the next person who answered better, next person who answered better than that, and the third person after me was like they were being interviewed by Larry King. So then the next question came to me again. I went, stop. I said, what? I said, don't ask me the first question. I said, why? I said, because they're smarter than I am. They've got better answers than me. Can you start at that end? So at least I've got a fighting chance to come up with something interesting by the time it came to me. Now, the audience laughed, and the interviewer laughed, and the panel laughed. And so they started all the questions at the other end. But strategically, I'd hijacked that panel. I'd rewired it and reframed it the way I wanted it to be. So I would have more time to think about the answers. So when they come to me, I've got the option, give something new and insightful, agree with anybody who's been before me, or throw it to the audience and ask what the audience. I've got a load of different tools and tricks to play with because I can get the final laugh. And if you look at the best scene stealers, that's like a Bill Murray. Bill Murray on camera is famous for walking in and not caring. It's like in Ghostbusters, you couldn't take your eyes off him because he was the one who would say something that would make everybody laugh their heads off and still stay within the character, but do it right. So I rewired and reframed my relationship with the panel and with the interviewer and with the audience because I wanted it to be Dave shaped. Now I would never do that. If I was running the gig, I'd make sure that it was all run the way that I wanted to. Now you've got to be very careful to not do it in an arrogant way. You've got to do it in a and in fact, one of the tips I would give is don't try and be funny. Be warm. Warm works just as well as funny, but it means the pressure is off you. If you're warm, like Oprah Winfrey is not funny. If she does crack a joke, it becomes the best joke ever because it feels different to what you're listening to normally. But when you go to an Oprah Winfrey show, you know that you're going to feel welcome in that show. Even if you don't like the guest or the subject, you're in a safe space. So as a host, as you do very, very well, Jeff, you make the guests feel welcome, you make the audience feel it's a warm environment to be in. And so if you want to be funny, you can be, but you don't have to be. If you're a comedian, you've got to better your jokes all the time, or you're not as good as the other comedian. And that's a really hard act to follow. So don't do it.
That's good advice. What was the Dollar Shave Club? Do you remember those guys? Do you remember they hit the big time with one video, right? And it's a marvelous video. But so they asked the guy, the founder of the company, who kind of had a comedic background or a theater background. I can't remember, but so they asked him. They said, "Well, should we try to be funny in our videos?" And he says, "Well, are you funny? If you're funny, then do it. If you're not, then don't try." Right? So anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done comedy. I'm a stage hypnotist, so I've built comedy into that. But what I am is I'm a funny guy, but I'm not a joke teller. So I find that there's a kind of persona that I can have as a host of an event where you can be funny, you can be with the audience, get the audience's Wi-Fi code. I can play it straight if it's a business event, or I can add some humor when it needs to be. But I watch a lot of people who are kind of outside of their depth, and it's cringy. It's really hard to be a stand-up comedian. It's really difficult. By the time you get to the level of some of the guys you see on TV, they've died more times than anybody else. But that's why they've got such good acts, and that's why they're such top-of-the-range professionals. Watch a guy like, take any comedian that you'd see making movies, like Kevin Hart or anybody like that. They can go on any stage and they kill it. They're brilliant at it. Any observation they make is brilliant. Why? Because they're so good at understanding how to work audiences. I think it's difficult to jump into that arena if you haven't had that experience, and you don't really want to get that experience live and burn an interview or an interview guest, because you'll get a reputation for not being very good, and people won't come back again. Play it straight, find your personality, and my own saying is jump and grow wings on the way down.
There you go. So finally, then, one of my last questions here. Sorry, we've gone over, but so what are the biggest trends that you see now that we've been through the pandemic, post-pandemic? People are attending more and more events. What are the biggest trends that you see for the next couple of years?
Well, I threw myself into the digital space. When we came through the pandemic, I realized that a lot of people would be using online, and it wouldn't go away. It would be a hybrid of stuff. So I'm into the metaverse. I'm into blockchain, not so much fintech. I got my fingers burnt, as many people have, with the cryptocurrency space, but it's still very valid, and it still has growth in it. And I throw myself into the digital world. Why? Because I believe that is the future, whether you believe in a metaverse or you believe, for instance, people talk about, we're building a metaverse. You're not building a metaverse. There's only one metaverse, like there's only one internet. You're building a virtual world inside the metaverse. So that way people can understand. But for me, I find that it's a fascinating place to be. What I find is you should go, it's like, for instance, Wayne Gretzky, the incredible ice hockey player, said, "Don't go where don't go where the action is with the hockey puck. Keep an eye on the game, read it, and go where the puck's going next." Right now, the puck is going towards digital, metaverse, remote. And as much as people are trying to fight it and go, no, no, it's coming back to the old way, it's not going to go completely back to the way it was. There's going to be a lot of people, for instance, who have businesses where they never meet their staff. They'll see them on Zoom, but they hired a guy in America, a guy in the UK, a guy in Germany, a lady in France, and so on. And they might never be face to face. And that's okay. That's fine. But that's the way things are going to go. So I think it's very dangerous to stay where you are. I would always keep an eye on new technology. I would say that is the biggest trend right now, because in business, what we used to have was a CEO was somebody who was great from sales. But then that altered. The CEO became somebody who was great from finances because they're the highest qualified person in the company. And so they're the best person to look at the data and say, right, we're going to make money from here and save it from there. And it actually made companies rich, but it also meant that companies lost their soul at the same time. And I don't mind saying that because I know a lot of accountants who would go, yeah, he's kind of right. But right now, the next generation of CEOs needs to come from a CIO, the chief information officer, the person who's capable, who's choosing the technology and the data. So what they're doing is looking at, so do we work on Slack, or do we work on WhatsApp, or we got another bit of software we put in here, and how do we put it to integrate it to the overall system? That person who's predominantly a guy knows more about what the company is doing than anybody else, more than a CEO. So he's the main person. It's like the Mr. Spock of Star Trek. But the problem is, because they're so good, they come from a technology background, an engineering background, programming background. So they're like basically accountants. They don't have much of people skills. And 99% of them haven't actually been in any other department. So it's very hard for them to become a CEO because they have no experience about how the company runs, because they generally weren't invited into those meetings. They've got to learn a ton of new skills to be able to do it. And so one of the problems they've got in that particular industry is there's no women in it, or very few women in tech, very few women at a decision-making level of where things are going. So that's going to change in the future. So I would say that the best thing to do with trends is see what comes up on Google and see where you want to be. What are your skills? What are you interested in? What has your background given you an insight to be able to talk about? And who's your audience? My audience, I know exactly who they are. They're business owners who are at C-level, who want to be seen as celebrities in their industry. They're not doing it because they want to be famous and have people come and say, sign my autograph, but they know their stuff, but they're looking at other people who've done really well, saying, I know what they do and I've done better. Why am I not getting the calls? Why am I not able to be positioned at that same level? And so I work with them. It's important to know your audience. It's important to be able to put that together. And once you've got that, then the trends kind of fall into place, because you just need to look at what shows up in your newsfeed. One of the tools that I use, for instance, is Flipboard, flipboard.com. Brilliant platform where you can put in the subjects of what you're interested in. So for me, it's about personal branding, it's about speaking, a little bit of politics, but more about new technology and so on. So I get a feed every few moments, like every 30 seconds, I'll get about 2 new articles from anywhere on the internet on the subjects that I've chosen. And it becomes a magazine on my phone. Now, what that means is that when I want to make posts on social media, or I want to research about what I'm going to be talking about, or any of the subjects of the people that I'm discussing stuff with, I can see the trends, I can see the latest stuff coming up on my phone. So I don't have to just do a Google search. I don't have to pick up a newspaper or magazine. My own magazine comes to me from flipboard.com. And I'm not earning anything from it. I've found that it's a great way to create content, and it also helps you to focus on the space that you're in by getting more content that comes through on that, so you can then position yourself as an expert on it. An expert doesn't mean you know more than anybody else. In many cases, especially as an interviewer, you just need to be able to ask the right questions to somebody who knows more than anybody else.
Excellent. So just to recap then, if you don't mind, what kind of clients do you work with, and what's a good first step up? Let me ask it again. What kind of clients do you typically work with? And for those who are interested in working with you, what's a good first step?
Fantastic question. Thank you. I normally work with anybody who wants to have their life better. If they want to speak better, if they want to be able to be branded, if they want to get the right mindset, and they also want to have extra income streams as a direct result of that. Typically, what I've done is worked with people who are entrepreneurial, who started their own business, but I've also got an organization called the Game Changers, which is a global community. Now, some people are big hitters, are very successful multimillionaires, and some people are in jobs where they get paid a salary, but they've always wanted to run their own business, or they've always wanted to have a side hustle doing what their passion is really all about. So you can find out about the Game Changers on my regular posts on LinkedIn. Find me under Dave Crane Dubai. You can go to speakonstage.com, where you've got all the details about the stuff that I offer to the world. Or even better, just Google Dave Crane, and a load of stuff will hit you to the point where you wish you'd never done it. And that's pretty much the audiences that I'm working with. I'm open to help anybody. For working directly with me, then I will have a chat with you about it. But I've got enough content out there. If you've enjoyed the conversation that we've had, which I have indeed, Jeff, thank you, then there's enough content I give out all the time to help people to find their own space and find their own success. Because one day I won't be here anymore. And it doesn't matter. I don't believe I'm going to somewhere special. I think I'm going in a box. And so I want to give everybody around me who I meet or comes into contact with me as much stuff to make their life better as I can do. Whether they say thank you to me or meet me, I don't care. As long as you get something out of the impact of me being on the planet, happy days.
For sure. Thanks for the kind words and for all your ideas that you share. That's amazing. So, is there any question? Are there any questions that I didn't ask that you wished I would?
Ooh. Not really, to be honest with you. I mean, I enjoyed talking about all the subjects that you shared with me. I don't often get the chance to talk about being an interviewer or being an interviewee, because very few people are in a position like yourself where you understand it and it becomes relevant. Remember, 99% of people, or at least 90% of people, have a massive fear of public speaking. And so they've got a lot going on in their head, but they just don't like to articulate in front of a live audience. So the odds of being interviewed by somebody about how to do interview techniques are really small and remote. But I mean, what I do is I show people how to pitch their business, how to get more paid gigs internationally by pitching their business. And even if you're not paid to speak on a stage, you can also get money from the back end, which is you go on stage, you talk about your expertise, and you help people in the audience, whether it's done as a clinic or as a series of case studies, or you educate people. And what happens is people then come up to you afterwards and say, can you help me with my stuff? So you might not be paid initially a lot at the beginning, but you get paid to do what you do for a living afterwards, because then you've got a lot of clients you hadn't even considered until you started speaking. So I think anybody who wants to monetize their ability to be an expert, anybody who wants to find their position in life being the best that they can be, then it's worthwhile contacting me. Do it through social media, Google me, Dave Crane, or just go to speakonstage.com. And I will be here for you in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of free stuff you can get for free anyway. But there we go. Join the Game Changers too.
Excellent. It's my belief at this point in time in the business world, every company needs to have two things, two kind of skill sets, or two different roles people play. They need someone who can interview people well and do it well, and they need people who are good spokespeople who can give good interviews, because they're not always one and the same, and the skill sets are entirely different. I have done a lot of client interviews and such, and I've had one client who he was like, oh gosh, I'd like to have you do it, but I've got this resource through the government that some sort of agency that's here to help me with my marketing, and they'll do it for free. So do you mind giving this guy the questions that you would ask me? Right. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. So I gave this guy the questions, and the interview was awful.
Yep.
Just the agency guy was trying to lead on. It was just too obvious what he was, trying to do. Instead of, you've got to be neutral, or else no one's going to believe what you're saying. If you're trying to
You've got to be authentic and transparent, and like I say, it's basically holding a mirror up in front of the person in front of you. And if everything they give you are canned answers, it's going to seem like it's false. And the key is so many podcasts. There's like 2 million podcasts out there, and everyone's got choice. You go into iTunes or go into what's it called, Spotify. There's thousands and thousands of options. They don't have to listen to you, so you've got to honor their time and not waste it, because you'll never get it back again. You might not get them back again. So what I would say in that case is, when you talk to somebody on the phone or you talk to somebody on Zoom, if you don't feel that they're going to be a good fit and you feel obliged to interview them, but don't use it. Hold on to it. Maybe use a clip of it on social, but you don't have to drag somebody through that painful watching paint dry in a human being experience, because all it does is damage your own personal brand, and they'll turn around and think twice about spending quality time with you again. I mean, the way I see it is, you should always be looking at people who are going to make it worthwhile for your audience. Otherwise, don't interview them.
All right, good tip. And the other thing is that, especially in today's high remote work world and the hybrid environment that we're in, and so I think one of the key skill sets for leaders is to be able to communicate by video with a remote team, besides just live meetings, right? To be able to record video instead of dragging everybody through another Zoom meeting. What about doing a video where you can communicate what the goals are, the objectives, the progress, and celebrate success? I think that's going to be a really important skill set in the future for leaders who are trying to manage and bring together these remote work from home teams.
I agree with you, that the problem is that most of them are petrified of cameras and egos. They don't want to look stupid unless they're very good at speaking and had experience at it. They just won't do it. And you and I know that if they do it right, then you sell your brand really well. But they won't do that. Why? Because they don't want to look stupid. So I think that it's still in its very early days. I mean, I remember before the pandemic, nobody would go on Zoom for a conference. I was always in the car on the way to meetings, and with traffic in Dubai, I'd get maybe 3 or 4 meetings in if I was lucky per day. That would be a busy day for me. When people say to me now, Dave, can we have a meeting? And I'll say no. Why? Well, I'm not sitting in 45 minutes worth of traffic for anybody. We'll jump on Zoom. Well, we prefer a face-to-face. Once you've hired me, I'll let you know if we're going to do a face-to-face. But for a first meeting, I prefer to do it like this. And I don't think I've had anybody who's said no. 1 or 2 were a bit funny about it, but I don't care. I'm not sitting in a waiting room for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, while they're busy talking to somebody else who's clearly more important than me. One day I'll be dead. I'll never get that time back again. I'm not wasting it staring at some rubbish magazine or on my phone thinking I wish that person valued me better. No, not done. So I think that when it comes to the skill sets you're talking about, in a perfect world, as you and I train people to be able to do that, then it'd be a great skill for people to have. But what they tend to do is they tend to just want to do their stuff effectively. So, for instance, I started writing a book, and the book was Speak on Stage, which goes to my website. And one of my mentors is the #1 KPI guy on the planet, a guy called Jeff Smith. So I started writing a book, and he's got a number of bestsellers, multimillionaire, very successful. So I said, I'm writing this book called Speak on Stage. He said, who's it for? I said, CEOs, to teach them how to speak properly, so they can go on stages around the world, they can talk about their company, they'll be super successful, they can deliver great content and be amazing. He said, right, who's it for? I said, the decision makers. He said, why would they want your book? I said, because it will teach them to be great speakers. He said, why do you think they want to be great speakers? I said, because it can sell their company better. He said, they don't want to be great speakers, they want to deliver very quickly, more effectively, and leave. And I took a step back and thought, you know what? You're absolutely right. They don't want to know how the speaking business works because they've got a business already working on. They want to deliver fast messages to their staff, get interviewed effectively. And so what I do is I redid the book from scratch, and I made it all about scripts. It was like speaking for dummies. So within 60 seconds, you can open the right page, and there's a page there on how to motivate your team. You put your name in here, you put your company here, you put 3 stories, and you do a saying at the end of it. That's it. That's your template. So the book is all about teaching decision makers how to be more effective as a speaker without having to become a speaker. Now, it's a long-winded way of saying I think that what you're talking about by doing video to these guys, I don't think they want to be CNN presenters. I think they want to just make sure that their staff don't have any questions. And I think that's the key. I don't think they care about branding internally. Some do, some don't. But I think it's really about how they can get the most effective way to get across to their staff. And if they do it right, they go on like this and they start talking to the camera and it's recorded or it's live, done. But I think that many will carry on just sending memos and WhatsApp messages and Slack messages and ClickUp messages, and that's what they're going to do. Will it change? Maybe. Will people jump into the metaverse? I don't know. I mean, you and I'm a little bit older than most people, but when people talk about the metaverse, we go, wow, metaverse. But do you remember playing Doom when you were a kid?
Playing what?
Doom, where you had a little character.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
That was the metaverse. That was a virtual world where you had a character. That was 30 years ago. So do people like being in that world? Yes, they do. The gaming world has gone through the roof for that. Whether people want to be in a virtual office or not, I'm still not convinced. I think they might like it if they can't go to the live events. But other than that, the idea of us having these like Nintendo Wii style characters with just the top half of your body and a big cartoon head, I don't see it. What I see as being more realistic is augmented reality or mixed reality. So whether you've got contact lenses or you've got your phone, you've got your glasses on, you look at people and their social media pops up. And you can see their LinkedIn, you can see their Instagram, you can see if you've interacted, you can see how many people you've got in common. And when you go to a supermarket, you can see the pricing and everything, and the sell-by date and the reviews of certain products. I see that as where things are going because they're useful and they're practical. The idea of jumping into a virtual world, I can't see it, certainly not yet, even though everyone's pushing it because they want to get the real estate. So to go back to the question about people wanting to jump onto cameras, I think it's an amazing skill for those who can do it right. But I still think that you and I, Jeff, are talking about 10, maximum 20% of leaders get it and will do that and will use video effectively.
Interesting point. I think it's just human nature. People are going to do mostly what they've been doing. They're averse to change, but also they're going to do what's easiest.
Easy.
It is much easier to send an email, to send a message, than it is to set up a studio and get your camera and lighting and background and everything. It's a lot more work. So a lot of people just aren't going to do that.
Well, I remember talking to one of the big hitters in the motivational world. I think it was Jack Canfield. And I was saying, do you know, Jeff, what percentage of people into personal development and self-improvement? Know what percentage of people are into it?
Oh, gosh, good question. I would guess off the top of my head, it would be pretty high, but something makes me feel like maybe it's a lot lower than I think.
Have a guess. Out of 100.
Out of 100, how many people are interested in personal development? I'd say 25.
Right, about 3. 5 to 3%. Now, this might have changed with the pandemic, and it might have changed with millennials and Generation Z, because they are also more savvy about what's going on in the world. But most of them just know more stuff. They're not really into personal development. So I talked to Jack Canfield, and I said to him, how do you get more people into that? Because I want to sell products. I want to get them interested in coming onto my events. How do I get more than the 5% in? And he said, you can't. They'll only do it when they're ready. Concentrate on that 5% and give them what they're looking for. And from a sales point of view, is absolutely ready. Is absolutely right. Why would you try and convert somebody who doesn't want it? Instead, provide for those who do. And it just makes more sense. So I would suggest that for the 10 to 20% who put in a Google search, how to do better Zoom calls, you have a great product and you have great coaching, mentoring ready for them. And don't worry about everybody else. They'll either jump in when they feel the need and there's a tipping point, or they just won't bother. But you're not wasting your time with them either.
Good point. Okay, speaking of time, sorry we've gone way over, but I sure have enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. I
Thanks
talk a
for
lot. I'm sorry about that.
pardon me.
I talk a lot.
Oh, yeah, you really do need some coaching to help you come out of your shell, is what I'm thinking. So,
I'll call you if that's okay.
yeah.
I'll get my people to call your people.
Absolutely. I'm here for you. Okay,
Thank you
Dave,
so much.
anytime. But thanks for staying up in your evening there in Dubai and sharing your expertise. It was a true pleasure.
It's an honor. Thank you so much. I'm going off now to walk the dogs because the thing is, as soon as I go in my office, I know that I open the door and my two dogs will be waiting, going, "What time do you call this?" They don't wear watches, but you get the general idea. So that's where I'm heading next, into the heat, and to take them around the block.
That's funny. That's exactly what I'm getting ready to do too. All right.
Cheers, Jeff.
Yeah, so it's good to be a dog's best friend, right?
They're the only ones day in, day out who look happy to see me. No, don't get that from the wife, don't get that from the daughter all the time, but the dogs do. I know it's only because they get fed and walked by me, but I'll take that.
Yeah, as little, recognition and value and love. We all need more, right? So it's nice to know that the dogs are always there for you. Okay, Dave, have fun.